It's time. It's time for you to live better.
It's time for you to feel healthier.
It's time for you to live longer.
It's time for you to enjoy your journey.
It's time for you to understand your body and your mind. Thank you so much for joining us on It's Time today. We are your hosts. I'm Lindsley Donnelly, your citizen scientist and your longevity expert for midlife women.
And I'm Dr. Jen Wagner, physician and holistic performance expert. Welcome to It's Time, powered by Prosper. Just a quick reminder, the information discussed in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. We are not offering medical advice, nor are we entering into any type of physician or clinician relationship with listeners. Always consult your healthcare provider before beginning any new fitness, nutrition, or lifestyle changes to ensure they're right for you. Your health and safety is our priority, and let's keep it that way. Thank you.
Here we are. Yes. And I'm so excited. Ashley, we have been talking about you in Park City together for 6 months because the work that you're doing is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
It has been, it has been phenomenal in the training you've been doing, but then more specifically stepping it up into a research study, which we're going to get a ton into. But before we can jump into the details, do you mind just giving us a little bit of your history and how you came into the work that you're doing now, evolution, as well as BFR?
Yeah, sure. Super excited to be here. So I was kind of a lifelong athlete. I was a national champion in college in track and field and started coaching, had some amazing coaching opportunities, and then landed kind of in fitness sort of unintentionally, but then really dove in and loved it and opened my own studio, kind of a personal service, high-end in middle of Silicon Valley. We have about 40 health professionals that work here, personal training, physical therapy, chiropractic, massage, acupuncture. So kind of the whole well-rounded health services. And I've been doing that for, 19 years, which is hard to believe.
That's awesome. That's like our plate. Want to go there? I know. Like, our brand is up.
You guys gotta come visit when you're in the area for sure. So yeah, I did that and been going about my career speaking in the fitness industry and doing my thing. And then my personal history. So part of the reason I mentioned I was an athlete, I had a hip injury as a kid. I actually broke it skiing when I was 13. It healed good enough. I didn't notice it that much for 10 years of competing at a very high level. But by my mid-20s, I was already having significant hip injury issues.
Yep.
And by the time I really looked into what it was, there were bony changes that were kind of irreversible. I had lost cartilage. So literally limped my way through my 30s, which was pretty demoralizing coming off of being an elite athlete and just couldn't literally training clients and not being able to do most of what my clients could do. And just, it was rough. Finally, yuck, exactly. I finally had a hip replacement after much deliberation and putting it off. And I had a earlier surgery to try to, and had a hip replacement at 43, and unbeknownst to me, sort of went through menopause, actually had perimenopause all in my late 30s, but without even realizing it until later. Went into menopause the same year that I had my hip replacement.
Wow.
And And what that did for me is, meant the next 10 years kind of sucked. I lost probably 8 pounds of muscle, no matter how hard I tried to maintain it. Being a trainer and an athlete, I knew plenty about lifting and lifting heavy, and my body couldn't do it. And I wasn't getting any results. And I was depressed and I was worried about my long-term health. And I had always thought, I'm an athlete. I'm strong. I know how to work out. I'm going to kick ass as I get older. Like, this is going to be, I'm going to do this thing, the right way. And it was very humbling realizing how much of that is actually out of our control a lot of the time.
Yes.
And I think until we get there as women, we don't really recognize that hormones and our bodies and what happens in our bodies is we all go through it regardless of our backgrounds to get there. Now, you might come into it at a better place if you're fit, but there's still this big adjustment we have to make.
Yeah.
Enter BFR, blood flow restriction. I found out about it, ironically, from my dad, who has always been an athlete, but he was almost 80 years old. He had a shoulder replacement. His doctor turned him on to BFR, and he turned me on to it. And I'm pretty curious about it and kind of was tinkering with it for a while. And then probably been using it on and off for 3 years, but it was really about a year and a half ago where I attended a lecture that basically blew my mind. Like, total paradigm shift of everything in the 30 years I've been in fitness. Whoa, this is such a different way of thinking about exercise. And from that point on, I put it in my program first and foremost. And within a month, my hip and my leg that had been atrophied for 10 years from my surgery, literally, I would say 90% caught up to my other leg within literally like a month or so of training. And yes, exactly that expression, Lindsley. I was like shocked. Like, how is that even possible? And the short version of how that's possible is I was able to tap into those type 2 strong muscle fibers using a lightweight with BFR that I was not able to tap into without BFR because I couldn't go heavy enough on my compromised hip. And so it kind of returned on these type 2 muscle fibers, which are the muscle fibers we lose the fastest as we age, and they're the hardest to get back, right? And so I had this very, very profound aha moment of not only how much it helped me, but I start talking about all my friends and my clients and getting people to start using it and continue to see these very fast changes and fast results and people having success when they had been trying other ways before and not having success, that it led me down this path of creating this program that there's this huge hole. I mean, BFR, as you guys know, being on the cutting edge of science and what's out there, is like, it's being talked about and it's been talked about for a while, but nobody knows exactly how to start. Like, it's a whole different way of training. So then it's like a million questions. Well, like, how much do I do it? How much weight? What's the volume? What days do I do it? When do I do my other things? Like, what bands do I use? And how do I even put them on? And, so there's this huge barrier to getting started. And it's it's intimidating and it's scary. And so I was like, I want to build the bridge that helps people make this very accessible and very simple. And let's just start from the beginning and people up in a very safe, gradual way, but really that's going to lead to them very efficient and effective results in a very different way than what they've probably been doing up till now.
Yeah. And so when I came across you, it was, I was introduced through a doctor who specializes in menopause through Yumi Ando, Dr. Ando. And I had heard about BFR on David's podcast on the Ageist or Super Age. And it was and I'm going to let you describe the background of how it was engineered, but I was interested. But it was one of these things where I was like, oh, that's interesting. But the idea that I'd go out and do it just seemed, too much friction. Just going to go get the band. And then what was so amazing is you had this 30-day program and I did the whole test before, test after, the push-ups and the grip strength. And I could see this. I could see the change. I could see that and I'm already pretty fit. It wasn't like I was coming out of plan zero, and I could see change in 30 days. And so then it just becomes a question of how do you incorporate it into a routine that you can take, on the road or take in to a gym where you like to work out. So, that was the context of how I got to train with it. And I got curious because I don't have an injury, knock on wood yet, but I do lift really heavy and I'm starting to just notice I can feel it in my hip or I can feel it in my shoulder. I'm thinking, I don't know that this is the way I want to go for 40 or 50 years, which is what brought me back to go, okay, maybe I'd try this a little more for preventative, not just for recovery.
Exactly.
Do you mind just because I don't know if people listening have actually had a chance to hear about BFRs, but do you mind telling the story about how it started and what it actually is? Because we're just saying BFR as if people know, but they may not.
Yeah. No, great point. Yeah, I still am surprised there's so many people that haven't even heard of it yet. And so getting the word out. It was discovered like 50 plus years ago. So it's not new, but it was discovered in Japan, kind of randomly. A man was praying. He used to long prayer sessions kneeling. And that was and he would start to notice that when he would do that and he'd get up afterwards, his calves would burn as if he had worked out hard. And so he sort of made this connection of what was happening. He started playing with this idea of somehow I'm not getting blood flow to my calf, but it's feeling like it's getting fatigued. So he started doing a bunch of research on it. And then ironically, he had an injury. He broke his leg skiing. I think it was skiing. And he was in a full leg and he restricted the very top of his leg right above his cast and started doing just whatever exercise he could do. And when they removed the full cast 6 weeks later, he had almost no atrophy in his cast, even though his calf, he couldn't even move his lower leg. So
Yeah.
the hormones, the human growth hormone he was able to get. So that's when I think the light bulb really went on and they started studying it. It got really big into physical therapy. And that's where it probably has most of its science and research and kind of, it's got a great reputation in physical therapy for people to recover from an injury or surgery more quickly because they can start to exercise under light loads and get the hypertrophy, not get so much atrophy, but without stressing the injury or the joint or whatever's been affected in the injury.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing to me is then like it stops there. Like the physical therapist, like, we're going to use it in these 6 weeks while you're recovering. Wow, you've gotten great gains, no stress in your joint. Great. Okay, you're done. Move back on to regular training. It's like, why wouldn't this just be good for fitness and in particular as we age and in particular for longevity when we need our joints to last a long time? And I'm not saying never lift heavy at all, but why lift heavy 4 days a week when maybe you can just lift heavy 1 day a week and then supplement that? And that's kind of what I've landed on for myself. I feel much better overall, less aches and pains, less inflammation, less soreness, but my strength has continued to go up. Even on my heavy days, my now heavy day strength is stronger, even though my volume is way, way, way less. So,
Okay. That's what's, I think, so compelling. Actually, I don't have my BFR bands with me. Do you have any
I do.
there?
Yeah.
Because I know
do.
this is a podcast, but sometimes people are watching on YouTube too, so you can sort of show it and describe what is a BFR. What is it? Blood flow
They're
restriction.
blood flow restriction cuffs, and you wear them on your very upper arm, and you have other bigger cuffs that go around your upper leg.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried all the cuffs out there. I just want to say my goal is not to sell particularly cuffs. I want to be the coach and sell my program, but you need cuffs, and I've tried them all, and this is my favorite one because it is the most comfortable, super easy to use, doesn't require technology. Some of them will have Bluetooth, and then you need your phone, and if it's not charged, there's sort of those kind of friction issues. Yeah, so I just use these. They're great. They're not a tourniquet. That's another thing. When you pump them up, they have these individual pockets. You can kind of see the little lines in there that become individual pillows. And so you're getting blood flow no matter how tight you go. And that's some of the myths of the old blood flow is you'd have a real wide cuff, like a blood pressure cuff. And if you pump it too much, it can stop your blood flow. And then that can be risky if you do that for too long. This solves any of those kind of concerns. So I think that's another reason why now these type of bands have only been around maybe like 7 years. So there needed to be a band that was affordable, easy, simple, comfortable that a general consumer would use. And I think that is now making it, now that it's on the market, it makes it more possible and removes the barrier for people to use it for fitness.
Yeah.
So
are they pneumatic then? You just plug it in?
Yeah. So you plug in, you just have a little pump like that, and you just have a regular pump that shows your pressure. You pump it to a prescribed pressure, but then you everybody's a little different. It depends on how much tissue you have, where your veins lie. We're just trying to slow down the blood flow in the veins. The arteries are much deeper, so it's not really impacting the arterial flow. So and then you can kind of learn what your number is and always use that. And just like any workout program, as you progress, you can gradually increase the pressure to continue to challenge the response your body's having from it.
Super interesting. So thank you for sharing all of the backstory. I always think it's great. We talk about, so much attention right now to lifting heavy. And we all know that that's really important, but that's just really not accessible to all people. And I think there are a lot of people that are, even if it is accessible, are really uncomfortable going down that pathway. So I think it's so great to be able to introduce some alternatives that can still lead to really amazing results. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions because I've actually never done it, and I'm excited to learn more and try it.
Yeah.
So you say upper arm now or upper leg. Like if you just wanted to do a calf workout, would you put it in a different place, or do you always do those two sites?
You always do those sites, and it does. That's a question a lot of people have is, is it just going to work, my arm and my upper leg? And it actually impacts all the muscles in your body because primarily of what's happening, you get this restriction of blood flow, which puts the muscle in a hypoxia, which builds lactic acid in the muscle, which tells the brain, whoa, we're in major fatigue. We need to respond. And the brain responds with human growth hormone, as well as some other anabolic processes, but the human growth hormone is the big one. And that impacts every muscle in your body. Just like Dr. Santo, the guy who discovered it, who was in the cast, his still benefited, even though he was not even moving his calf. So it does affect all muscles in the body. You'll notice fatigue. Like if you're wearing all 4 bands and you do a core exercise, you will feel the fatigue in your core faster than you would without the bands. Yeah.
I also feel it in cardio, like when I do sprint interval training with the bands on, I mean, I'm gassed earlier. It's, I would say it's humbling because, I'm fairly comfortable lifting really heavy weights and doing sprints. I mean, we do them together. And I wear these bands and I'm like, I cannot believe I cannot do a bicep curl more than 10 pounds. Like, I'm usually curling 20 to 25, so
exactly.
And sprints it is too. So somehow it's also kind of supporting that VO2 max build.
Yeah. And that's a great point because a lot of the research has been on building strength, and it's 100% been shown that BFR with light weights will build hypertrophy and strength just as lifting heavy. And in some cases, in my opinion, even more. But the vascular benefits are vast. What it's really doing is as it restricts your venous blood flow, your body realizes that, your brain realizes, wow, we need to get more oxygen to our muscle. We're having a hard time doing that. So it releases nitric oxide, which thins your blood a little bit. It expands your vascular system, which makes your vascular system more flexible, which is something that we typically lose as we age. Arteriosclerosis, we get higher risk of blood clot, stroke. That's when blood pressure starts going up. So it teaches the vascular system to be more flexible again. And it improves the efficiency through mitochondria as well of getting oxygen into the cell. So we think of VO2 max, or I used to, as lung capacity and heart strength and heart, how much blood can you pump per heartbeat. And that's sort of what determines your VO2. But the other huge half of that equation is your vascular system, how healthy and efficient it is, and your mitochondria, taking that oxygen from the bloodstream and turning it into energy into the cell. Mitochondria gets talked about a lot with like zone 2 training and all of that, but BFR really impacts the health and efficiency of mitochondria. So the second half of the VO2 chain is drastically improved with BFR, and my VO2 max has gone up pretty considerably.
Interesting. That's cool.
Do you worry about any subsets of the population using this? Like, are there any contraindications to training like this or cautions you need to take?
Yeah, great question. So you need to be cleared for exercise in general. So if you normally can exercise, then you can use BFR, but there are a few contraindications. For example, if you have untreated high blood pressure, I would first probably want to get that treated with medication, then introduce the BFR, but then eventually you may be able to go off that medication because it will improve blood pressure. Another contraindication is if you have acute lymphedema, like this is common sometimes in women who have had breast cancer. So then you want to be careful. You can use it on the other limbs and that can still give you benefit. I've had some women who the lymphedema is not very acute. They've had it for a while and it's stable and they use the bands lightly and it actually will improve that for them. And so I just think it's like use common sense. If there's a concern, start conservatively. Obviously, you want to consult your doctor. The one tricky part is not all doctors fully know about this. So then that can be like, what do you do in that case? Maybe try to seek out a doctor that has some knowledge in this. What I will say is the person who invented these bands was a very, very well-respected cardiologist in Park City who worked with all the ski and snowboard athletes. Dr. Jim Stray Gunderson. Have either of you heard of him?
No, we should know Gunderson.
I know some Gundersons in town, but not him. Yeah.
He unfortunately, he passed away like 2 years ago. Oh. But he was the mastermind behind this. And there's a bunch of videos. I actually learned from his videos because I wanted to learn from the guy he studied with the Japanese. He was kind of the BFR guru in the US. And he invented these bands wanting to make BFR safe and accessible for everyone. So I feel good knowing he was a cardiologist. That's his specialty. Right. And he's recommending this to, the vast population.
Yeah.
One thing that is fascinating to me, and I have been reading more and more about kind of in different areas, is lactate. And I think how, as an athlete, you're always told that it's bad, right? We got to clear it out, this and that. And as a physician, we're learning so many benefits of lactate. It's like one of the few molecules that can cross our blood-brain barrier and really provide great information, can be a source of fuel for our brains, all of these things. And so what's your feeling and take on that? And have you noticed anything cognitively with your participants?
I love that you brought that up because I agree. I know lactate's been talked about always in the context of endurance athletes, right? Or in endurance sports where too much lactate is bad in that event, right? It's going to fatigue you. You're not going to be able to, so you're trying to always maintain just below that lactate threshold. But for overall health, getting a high lactate number in your workout is super powerful. It's a chain reaction to multiple benefits in your body. One of them being brain health, to your point, because it is fuel for our brain. BFR in particular increases BDNF, so you start to build more capillaries all through your body, but also in your brain. So it improves blood flow everywhere. So contra, it's blood flow restriction, but the impact is actually improving blood flow everywhere. I don't know that I've noticed cognitive change, but I don't know that I haven't. I don't know that I would notice that yet. I don't necessarily have any cognitive issues, but I have a couple women in my program. One woman who comes to mind in particular in her 70s, who's very nervous about Alzheimer's because it runs in her family and her mom had it. And she has noticed significant cognitive improvement since she's been using BFR.
Interesting.
Yeah. As you talk about that, you do a lot of pre and post testing. I wonder if there is we could get one of those cognitive online tests and just throw that in to be part of the pre and post testing.
That is a great idea. Yeah, I don't know a lot about cognitive testing, so I would love to get your recommendation on what.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could definitely pick some easy to use ones and very repeatable. There's lots of them. I think that so my mom passed away from dementia late last year. And so it's become more top of mind for me as I continue to age and going through that experience with her and my dad and our family. And so I kind of look for anything that can give that double benefit, right? And so even when I'm doing like sprint training and trying to be in a more anaerobic state, I know I can't stay there long enough to really create the lactate in the short term. And I just don't do endurance at a high enough level anymore to train in that space. And so this is, I think, just such an interesting benefit that people may not realize like right off the top.
Yeah, I think the increased lactate that BFR provides is the reason why it's so, that's the magic behind it, right? It builds so much more lactate in our muscle. It gets more lactate in our blood to circulate. We can maintain the burn and the lactate for so much longer because we're using lightweight. So if you think normally, if you're lifting heavy and you start getting fatigued, you can eke out maybe 2 more reps and you're getting kind of that burn and then you're done and then your muscle recovers and it's gone. Where with the BFR, you're using lightweight. You start to feel a burn at 10 reps. You can do 20 more reps. It's not comfortable. You feel it, but you physically can still move the weight. And that burn just builds and the lactate just builds and it stays there longer. And so it has a chance to get into the bloodstream to circulate and have these profound impacts.
I would say, as kind of the user, and I don't know very much about the science at all other than just reading it and then, learning from you, from some of your webinars. But the sensation of it is you put the bands on, takes like 2 minutes, and then you work out for like 20 to 25 minutes max, and you feel done. I mean, you have to get the bands adjusted so that there's enough pressure, and you have to challenge yourself with weight. But I tried in the beginning because I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I was like, I'm going to still curl the same amount. And you can't. And then you're like, okay, I should go longer, like 25 minutes. What? That's not enough. And you can't. You're like, hey, I'm done. Like, that's plenty. I love that. Anything, right? That's what I love it. I'm like, great. I just keep pumping this thing up 25 minutes in and out.
Yeah. And you're right. It's a total paradigm shift from what we used to think about training. But the truth is our brain doesn't know how long we work. We always think volume and time. That's always like the way, intensity or time, volume time, weight time. That's like the measurement for working out typically. But our brain doesn't really know how long we worked out or even how much weight we lifted. It just knows what's happening at the muscular cellular level what kind of fatigue is happening. And really it's that lactate signal, which is the main thing it's picking up on. And that can happen with BFR really fast. So that the time becomes sort of irrelevant. That's why it is such a different way of thinking about exercising.
Do you see the same, and I don't know if people have actually looked at this, but the same kind of metabolic effects with improved insulin sensitivity and some of the other things that we're starting to see with doing more and more research on lifting heavy, and the way it's even changing, the way our bodies can, our muscle cells can glucose uptake and all of those things, and improving insulin sensitivity.
So I really want to know more about this. I haven't seen studies out there, but it needs to happen, because when the other thing about when you're using BFR, your type 2 muscles are getting involved much quicker, because the lower oxygen causes your type 1 fibers to fail. So they sort of get out of the way, the type 2 muscle fibers, and they're what use glucose, right? So you're using type 2 muscle fibers for much longer, a much higher percentage of your workout than you're typically able to do without BFR. And so you're using more glucose. I'll notice I get really hungry after a BFR session sometimes. So it is using more glucose. So I don't have firsthand knowledge of it. I haven't seen a study, but my instinct is like, it's got to be doing something for that.
Although I think you have anecdotal with Lauren, that that interview you just did with her metabolic changes from May to now.
Wasn't that incredible?
4'11", it's dropped 22 pounds.
Wow.
She's an athlete already, and she had cancer, and she had the effects of injury, and just things were all kind of going off the rails. And she and Ashley started working together, and massive change. I mean,
massive.
The video, you can look at it and you're
massive
like, wow,
change.
That's
phenomenal.
I think it's so freeing to have an opportunity to try something that's less time, but as effective, because that is a friction point for so many women. They can't get to a gym and lift heavy for 45 minutes and as frequently as they need to see real results. And so the disappointment and the frustration of the efforts starts to kind of factor in.
And I also think, I think it is really hard to know is what is heavy when we're lifting. How, I think it's really hard to pinpoint by causing the amount of stress necessary to see the changes I want.
Yeah. To do it safely without somebody really right there with you, training with you.
Absolutely. So what kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes the missing comment when people talk about lifting heavy is it's a skill that takes years to develop. So you can't just all of a sudden decide you're going to go lift heavy. And for a lot of women that do, it's not really that heavy. It's heavier than maybe what they've lifted before. But in terms of the bone density and really creating change and getting the human growth hormone, and it's hard to get, you need years of experience to get to that level of heavy.
Yeah.
Especially,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. What kind of recovery protocols do you recommend if you're using blood flow restriction?
So the other cool thing about blood flow restriction is you don't need near as much recovery as traditional training, because really what we're doing. So if you think about traditional strength training without BFR, we're focused on mechanical loading. How much of mechanical load can we put on our muscle tissue, our tendon, our bone to create change? So you got to go heavy to create that kind of damage and fatigue to then rebuild, which takes time. You need that downtime to rebuild. BFR is not really using mechanical loading as its principle. It is using our metabolic processes, which what we have found through new science is that change happens much faster that way. So that's why it only takes 2 weeks to feel stronger instead of 6 or 8 weeks with traditional training. And you're not actually breaking down muscle tissue or connective tissue. So you don't need that sort of downtime to rebuild. So it's a different measurement. What I tell people is listen to your fatigue level. If you're feeling really fatigued, you probably need a day off or a light day. But once you've done BFR for a while and you've acclimated, you shouldn't feel too fatigued the next day. It's another kind of weird thing. Like I'll have people say, well, I wasn't sore, so I must not have got a good session. It's like, actually with BFR, you should not be sore. Besides maybe the first couple weeks when you're first getting used to it. But if you're sore, you're doing too much or you're going too heavy with the BFR, like that's no longer the goal. So the goal is to feel the burn and the fatigue in the moment and feel that as intensely as you can tolerate. But the next day, you should not feel any sort of real negative effects from that.
Because it is stark. Like when we do like a push-up with BFR, I actually have to, and I do regular push-ups, no knees or anything. I have to go to a wall push-up like for the last 5 or 6 reps.
Yeah.
It's really, it's how fast you go. So when you were describing that, it made me just wonder, Ashley, because I've only done it for a month in the prior time in the spring. And I know I want to make sure we talk about your 6-month test because I was so excited to be able to get in on that. But how do you progress? Are you progressing with tightening the bands? Are you progressing with a little bit of weight, or like how do you build?
Yeah,
Take the same level?
Great question. The way you progress, there's a couple of ways. I think the first way is continue to increase the pressure on the bands because your body will adapt. When I first started using them, I was 150 on the arms and that was plenty. And now I'm like 300 on the arms. And that's been over, over a year of consistently using it. So you can, your body will adapt. Your vascular system gets more efficient. So you'll continue to adapt. And I always say, adjust your bands first before you try to go heavier. Because again, we're not really trying to do mechanical load and we're trying to get that metabolic process, which is going to come from the band first and foremost. Secondly, you can tweak the weights a little and go up some. You're always going to lift significantly lighter weights with BFR. It's actually not safe to try to lift. So it's an important point to make. You should not try to lift your normal amount with BFR because you're more likely to potentially get injured because your muscles are not going to be as strong. That load is going to be too much for what you have. So 30 to 50% of what you normally lift is all you need for BFR. And I used to focus on 50. And honestly, I'm now more focused on the 30 and tightening my bands more and trying to get all those repetitions in. But you can kind of play with that. Yeah. The other thing is pacing. You can kind of advance by, less downtime, increasing tempo of movement. And another metric I look at is how much, let's say I'm doing a 20-minute workout. When I'm a beginner, of that 20 minutes, I might have burned 4 to 6 minutes, let's say, throughout that 20 minutes. But as I get more advanced, I want like 12 or 14 minutes of burn. Like I want to be burning as more of the time. So that just means, going faster between exercises. I often do circuits where I'll just go back to back, like, push a pull, push a pull, push a pull, where I'm resting one muscle group, but it's just quick between them. So there's zero downtime and that burn just keeps building. So those are the things I look at. You don't really want or need to go more than 20, 25 minutes if you're being focused and pushing yourself. The goal is not, I want to increase time. I would increase the kind of efficiency of what you're doing in that time.
I think that's an important point because I was tempted, of course, it was like, hey, it's working. I was like, I'm going to wear these bands all over. Like I wear my weight vest, and you cautioned me. You're like, no, you don't wear them 24/7. You just wear them for the workout.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
Will you describe a little bit more of like what type is the best cardiovascular training to do with them on? Do you want to be doing sprint things? What kinds of exercises do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. I recommend, depending on the level of the person, I would recommend starting with just like steady state cardio for maybe, 6-8 minutes. Like you get fatigued really quickly with them on, and then start to adjust to them. And then, if someone's in endurance, like I know some people that are triathletes who use BFR, instead of doing their 2-hour training, they'll do a 20-minute run or a 20-minute cycle, pushing themselves in that 20 minutes, but then they're done. And the vascular adaptations and the VO2 max is happening within that time. If you're more advanced, I like playing with the VO2 max type of intervals and the sprint intervals with them on. I think the VO2 max, they're the hardest, but they're kind of my favorite in that I think they're really, really effective with the VO2, with the bands on. Because the sprints, I still do those with the BFR some of the times, but they're so short and you're working on power, and it still will increase the burn and the fatigue, but you don't have enough time that it's not challenging the vascular system as much, where the 3 to 4 minute more VO2 type intervals, it's going to be challenging the vascular system more. So kind of depends on the goal, but if you're really looking at endurance, if it's longer endurance, like you're an endurance athlete, then I would do the longer, slow 20, 30 minute.
Okay.
But if you're kind of looking just optimal health, you're not really worried about an endurance component of competition or anything, I would focus kind of on the VO2 intervals. I still do one long day. I like to bike outside. I do one long day on the bike, no BFR, just enjoy it. I'm better on the bike than I used to be. I climb much easier. So that's been fun to experience. And then I have my one heavy day without the bands. And then I do 4 days with the band. 1 day that's VO2 and 3 days that are more strength focused. And yeah.
And then I remember asking you this in the beginning, but you sort of recommend the same protocol like your lifting weights, i.e. get protein right after BFR, do your creatine right after, you can do a sauna right after, like treat it the same way right after.
Yeah, because the same processes are happening. BFR really fires up your protein synthesis, just like lifting heavy does. So that's why you definitely want to get protein right afterwards. The sauna is just increasing blood flow to the, what am I trying to say? Not your intrinsic core, but to your limbs. Basically, you're getting that vascularization. So that's just helping circulate everything. So that's great. And yeah, the protein, I mean, we all know, I think, well, we don't all know, but people that probably listen to your podcast who are aware of the science, like protein is very important for women as we age. And I think just BFR and protein just pair together perfectly, right? In terms of getting that muscle growth and maintenance that we want.
So someone wants to start this. How do they find you? How do they find a protocol? Where do they get the bands? Like you can use me as an example because I'm so new to this and I'm so excited. And other than going and stealing Lindsley's, like get started.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. My whole goal with creating this program was to reduce friction for people to get started, right? So I try to do all the research, have the band. The way I have people start is they sign up for my monthly coaching. I'm doing a study right now, but even without the study, I do monthly coaching. It's $200 to sign up. It takes you through every baby step, exactly what to do, how to put on the bands, what your first workout should be, right through the whole getting started. So we start with an onboarding program. We have 2 onboarding programs. We have a foundational onboarding program with someone that's maybe not as advanced. Maybe they don't lift heavy consistently. They're maybe more intimidated by lifting heavy. So I would start them there. And then there's advanced. I had Lindsley start in the advanced, someone who's used to lifting heavy. They work out consistently. They want to kind of ramp up quicker. But I start everyone with an intro program to learn how to use the bands, learn how they feel for them. And there is an acclimation period because no matter how fit you are, if you haven't used BFR before, it's a new stress on your body that you haven't had before. So we don't want to jump in all 4 bands and go all out immediately. We start with just the arm bands and then just the leg bands, and we kind of gradually let your body acclimate to it and then progress from there. One unique thing I've been doing lately that I'm excited about is my goal is not to sell bands, as I said, but people need the bands. But the bands are $450. So what I do is I sell them for $50 a month as a rent to own program with my coaching. And after 6 months, you can keep them. So you end up only paying $300 for the band, which is basically my cost, but I'm retaining you as a client, hopefully with the coaching. You can obviously cancel at any time and make a decision, return the bands, buy the bands, whatever you want to do at that point. But I'm trying to reduce the initial cost to get more people on board and be able to help them through their journey. So the best way to start would be, my website is Selly Strength. So SELI, which is a play on my last name, sellystrength.com. Right now, there's no sales page up there because we're saving for this weekend to launch our study. But you can hit the contact us page and send me a message and I'll get you set up. After this weekend, we'll have the normal sales page on there where you can sign up on your own for the monthly coaching that come with the bands.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk about the study. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
I think this is so cool. I just want to put a pause on it because I don't think anyone has looked at the effect of BFR on women and on midlife, post-menopause women.
Yeah.
It's like our favorite topic, and you're right there in the bullseye. So thank you for doing that work.
I love it.
And I get to be in the study. So I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's awesome.
You can be in it too.
No,
You do.
I know.
Yeah, come on. No, you're not. Just on time. Yeah, so
it's fun.
as you guys, I'm out there on LinkedIn and seeing all the stuff that people are talking about, how women's health just has not gotten the attention. I mean, fortunately, it's starting to, and people are talking about it so much more. But just if you look at research, women are so underrepresented. And then you look at a niche like BFR, and it's like, forget about it. They're not even in the conversation barely. And if you were to Google BFR, you see these big guys with veins and sweaty and muscular. And the last thing most women would think when they look at that is like, I should do that. That looks like something that's a good idea. So, So it's like, but the ironic thing is I think of course, men can benefit from it as well. And I have plenty of men in my program, actually, but I feel like it is the tool for women. And so I am trying to change that stigma of it being scary, seeming like, oh, it's only for bodybuilders or it's only for someone who's super intense. It's like, actually, it's low risk, low injury, lightweight. It's perfect for women looking to have these positive changes that don't want to put this unnecessary stress on their body. So I had this just epiphany of like, I'm collecting data. I've had 150 people go through my program and I've gotten some amount of data here and there, but I realized I needed more structure. And I was just like, I want to start collecting data. And I'm not doing a clinical research trial. I'm not qualified and I'd be biased because it's my product, but I want to collect enough data and do a white paper to show, look, this really works. We had 30 women go through this program, 50 women go through this program, and look at what these results we found. And now someone at Stanford, someone, you know, who is in the research world, pick this up and now go do a clinical trial or a clinical research study on this because it really is this effective.
What factors are you measuring?
So we're measuring strength in push-ups, wall sits. We're measuring balance, which really comes more into play as people on the older side of my population. I have some women in their 70s, multiple knee replacements, things like that, and they've noticed a huge change in their balance and stability. So we want to measure that. We're measuring pain. People who have chronic pain, the pain will significantly go down or go away oftentimes, and it's partly because of the human growth hormone, it's partly because of the increased blood circulation. So we're having people track that. We're tracking motivation to exercise because what we're finding is because these workouts are short and you very quickly feel the results and get a result, the motivation to exercise we've been finding is going up. So we want to see if that's true across a broader range of people. And then we're tracking if anyone has any health issues that are like thyroid, cholesterol. There's another blood one and I'm blanking right now. Thyroid, cholesterol, blood pressure. If they're sort of the high end of normal or high, we want to track those and see if those change.
I think you had HRV in there.
Resting heart rate. We have resting heart rate because that should change. We don't have HRV partly. Not everyone has an easy way to measure that. I thought about like getting people a strap and just got a little cumbersome.
Yeah.
So there are.
I was gonna say, I'm also tracking. So we'll at least have a, N1 like we always do. And N1, I'm tracking body comp. So I'm tracking body comp and I'm tracking bone density and visceral fat. Got it.
Yeah, good point. So we do obviously DEXA scan, which I know you have a scale, Lindsay, that measures this stuff. But we're tracking measurements and weight as a
proxy,
proxy for body fat, right? So we're having women that are losing 1.5 inches, 2 inches in their waist in the first 3 weeks, and their weight's the same. So they've obviously lost some body fat, gained some muscle. Yeah. So we are tracking that. I would love to track DEXA scans, but it's a little bit of a barrier there. Yeah.
Super cool. Well, that's so exciting. And I think it's such a great approach to actually study it, right? Which I think is sometimes we make a lot of assumptions. Oh, this is going to work and this is going to work. And then to actually really be able to show people and then connect with, really the academic centers to say, okay, let's look at other things like who have the resources to measure lactates and to do some of these other really kind of intricate things and to really show what a difference it can make.
I think, Jen and I are lucky because we train at a gym, the Bow Collective here, where Whit, the founder of it, is really used to us just coming in with the wackiest stuff, like weight vests before people were wearing them. And so we gave her a little warning. We're like, we're coming in with the bands next week. So we'll send you a little video of how that goes.
I love it. I love it.
Exciting because if he's not really well known, it's going to be like, Jen, you got to come to that same class.
I will. That's funny. That's funny. That's right.
Just for giggles. Yeah.
Jen, we got to get you in. It sounds like.
I know for sure. It sounds awesome. Yeah. Really awesome. So, well, thank you for your time. I mean, this has been, I feel like my head is spinning. I mean, I could talk to you for like another 2 hours. I
may have to do more.
Absolutely. And I just think that it is all of these new and it's not even that new, but all of these kind of technologies that are becoming more mainstream and that we're learning about and how they can be so effective for certain parts of the population where they used to be kind of reserved for, these very, I'm going to use the word elite that I hate, like elite performers or people in a very subspecialized category, like a bodybuilder or something like that, and how they could be so beneficial, not just for appearance and strength, but for your overall health from a blood pressure standpoint, from a cognition standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint. Especially, like you said, by decreasing the friction, that it doesn't take very long. You don't need a whole lot of stuff. And you see results quickly, which I think is hard, especially in the longevity space. When we're talking about 40, 50 years, it's like, well, you do get a little demoralized, and it's hard to stay motivated because you're like, oh, maybe, what I'm doing now, I hope when I'm 80 is going to pay off.
Yeah.
People like me that need a little instant gratification. It's
Totally.
really.
Well, I do. I think BFR fits the Lindsley test of it's good for you now and helps you enjoy your life now, but also is good for you in the long run.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashley.
You're
We'll make sure
welcome.
everybody can
Thank you guys.
Yeah, all your videos too. Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Perfect. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. If you liked what you heard and you got some tips on how to live better right now and for the long haul, please help us reach more midlife women. Please share and rate and like this show. And we can't wait to continue the dialogue with you on our next episode. Until then, thank you. It's time.